Well, tonight is the second GOP debate, and of course it's going to air on Fox Business. On the radio side, it will be exclusively here on KCMO, 8 o'clock tonight. So we'll be airing that. If you're in the car, you want to listen that way. Sometimes it's more enjoyable than, looking at the smug faces on TV. But the question remains, what's the purpose of tonight? I mean, does it feel like just an undercard, or is there something else that makes it, compelling, must-watch TV? Let's ask that to Rich Lowry, the editor of the National Review. Always great to have him on KCMO. Rich, what's the answer to that question, my friend?
Yeah, I would say it's an undercard that matters. If you look at the first debate, macro, did it make a difference? No. Trump skipped it, even though the polls said people didn't like someone skipping the debate. He does his mugshot. Mugshot overwhelms everything. He goes up in some polls. But there was a micro effect within kind of what are now the also-rans, with mostly Nikki Haley getting a boost. Now, not huge, but, she went from like fifth or sixth to the third now reliably in Iowa and New Hampshire and nationally. Maybe not reliably, but in a lot of polls. So that makes a difference. But, you look at the national polling, this thing looks like it's, not even competitive and basically over. You look at the state-level polling, some of it looks a little more competitive. There's a CBS News poll just out that showed Trump at 51 in Iowa and 50 at New Hampshire. That's, if he stays there, obviously he's not losing. You can do the math. There's no way he's losing if he stays there. But in Iowa, it's 51-21, which doesn't seem close, but, if Trump comes down 10 and DeSantis comes up 10, not crazy to think that could happen. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but then you're like 40-30, going into the stretch when people really pay attention. So obviously Trump heavily favored in this thing, but I wouldn't say it's over yet.
So what, I feel like this is 2016 all over again, where it's like, okay, Trump's in the lead. He's in a much bigger lead than he was back then. But as long as you've got a bunch of other people sitting there kind of splitting votes, what's the point of any of this? I mean, what are you hearing? Is there's been online rumblings of DeSantis and Haley coming together. I mean, is that realistic, or are we just going to keep spinning our wheels here with the same folks?
It looks very 16-ish, except for, as you say, yes, Trump's stronger. So the 16 analogies, obviously Trump is Trump, DeSantis is Cruz. Cruz won Iowa. I think there's a chance that DeSantis could win Iowa, but then just didn't have broad enough appeal to go win other places, including, most importantly, for the early going New Hampshire. Then Nikki Haley could be Marco Rubio, someone who has some appeal, but just not wide enough to really win anywhere. And then you have Vivek as Ben Carson, someone who generates an interest and goodwill, but isn't going to win either. So the problem is, like, if Nikki Haley disappeared tomorrow, let's say, some of her support would go to DeSantis, but not all of it. Some of it would go to Pence, and some of it would go to Burgum, or who knows where else. DeSantis disappears. Some of his support would go to Nikki Haley, but some of it would go to Trump. Same thing with Vivek. So even if if there's just one other candidate in Trump, it's not clear that candidate would be at 50 because some of the support of the other candidates would go to Trump himself.
How about Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, joining us on KCMO? These recent polls coming out that show Joe Biden, trailing Donald Trump by, depending on the poll, 5 to 10 points nationally. I don't want to be a pessimist here, but how much of that do you think is real, Rich, versus maybe, some of these pollsters in the media sending a message to Joe that it's time to go home?
Yeah. I don't think it's that. I wouldn't be quite that cynical about it, but I've been naive before. He's not ahead by 10 points, but you only get an outlier when you're ahead by 10 points, when you're really close, or maybe ahead by, 2 or 3 points.
Yeah.
And there's another poll that, as you mentioned, has him ahead by 5. So the polling this early in a head-to-head general is not predictive, but the thing that we find in every single poll, and obviously we see in front of our own eyes, is Biden's incredibly weak, right? His job approval is weak. His ratings on honesty are weak. His ratings on the economy are weak, and 3/4 of voters think he's too old. So that's just the fact. Wherever Trump is, wherever the head-to-head is, that's a fact. And for me, that just guarantees if Trump's the nominee, it's at least going to be a close race, right? It was close in 16, Trump wins. Close in 20 in the states that mattered, Biden ekes it out. So it's going to be, I would expect, another nail biter.
Did I hear you say in a recent interview, Rich Lowry, on another radio station, that you met or got lunch with Trump in the last few weeks? Did I hear that right?
Yes, it was over the summer, but
okay.
That's true, yeah.
How did that? I know you probably can't share a lot, but how'd you feel coming out of that thing when it comes to 2020?
Well, I came out thinking no one's going to beat this guy. It's the first time I've met him. I've talked to him before, but I mean, he's just a big figure. I mean, he's a star. He's just literally a star. You can just feel it. He fills the room, which isn't necessarily true of anyone else. He was extremely gracious. He cares what people say about him. He cares what I say about him, and he was trying to win me over, not like in a harsh or strong-arming way, but in like a gracious, persuasive way any other politician would use. So that's one of my takeaways, that I didn't quite appreciate how much he obviously has incredibly unusual political skills in a lot of respects, things that no one else can do or ever will do. But then he also has, when he wants to, he can turn on the charm and make you feel important and make you at least feel like he's listening to you, like a good politician should. So, that's I think the underappreciated thing about Donald Trump. He's a good politician. You don't get this kind of hold on a party without being a good politician. You don't get a nomination 3 times in a row the way might happen here without being a good politician.
Well,
there are lots of downsides, but he's good at this.
See, that's amazing because no one's ever going to confuse you as some like Mr. MAGA sycophant or anything like that. I think you're a pretty straight shooter across the board, and he's trying to win you over. And everything I've heard is that part of Trump's skill set, the charm that he can turn on when he wants to, is underappreciated. But then, he puts stuff up on Truth Social, and it does the reverse, right? So, but people that meet him usually come away being persuaded and liking him in large part. Yeah,
and he just has that quality. I can see how, I'm resistant to this. And it wouldn't be, it's not I'm a journalist, so I'm not going into government. But I can see how people meet him, and they're like, I want to be part of this. He just has that natural draw, and he reached out to me because there was a column I wrote that was not overwhelmingly favorable, but he just liked the headline, and that was enough, and he was going to try to persuade me. And again, that's what a good politician does.
So what do you see happening on the other side then? I mean, suddenly you've got Gavin Newsom, he's becoming more prominent. Hillary Clinton starting to chatter a little bit this week. I mean, do you think the knives are out for Joe, or is he going to be able to hang on to this thing?
Well, I think there's a lot of worry. There's always been a lot of worry kind of behind the scenes and in private conversations, but it's bubbling up publicly more now, mostly with kind of the left-of-center punditry rather than Democratic politicians themselves, although you've had Nancy Pelosi and Jamie Raskin very cool about the prospects of Kamala Harris, which is obviously another key piece of this. But I think it's hard, we just don't live in an era of smoke-filled rooms. I mean, you can't smoke a cigar inside most places. And, if a delegation, I was talking to a Democrat in a green room recently who just said he thought if a delegation went to Biden, Chuck Schumer and James Clyburn and Nancy Pelosi and said, sir, you've done a great job, you have to quit. He'd say, make me, I'm not going anywhere. You can't make me do that. And he'd be right, because what would they do? Go out and sabotage him in public, not knowing whether he'd actually quit or not? And if he doesn't quit, you've sabotaged him and hurt him more. So I think the dynamic is hard. Some people think, non-crazy people think maybe they'd switch him out if the nominee is a Haley or DeSantis or someone who's young, not as radioactive as Trump, where they really worry about whether he could win or not. I mean, they should be worried about whether he can win against Trump. Maybe, but getting out late and having a convention decide or something is chaotic. That in itself, I think, would hurt the party's chances. So I think absent a health event, God forbid, I hope it doesn't happen. But there was another little stumble on the Air Force One stairs yesterday. I mean, he could have a terrible fall at any moment. But assuming that doesn't happen and hoping that doesn't happen, he's going to be the nominee, and they'll stick it out.
Yeah, it seems that way. And it just feels like we're in a weird place, Rich, where Donald Trump, the only candidate he may be able to beat is Biden, and Biden may only be able to beat Trump. I mean, it's just totally. You could say that about both guys.
Yeah, that was true in 2016. It was true in 2020, and it's true now. Yeah. And they're both weaker. As a colleague of mine pointed out, if Trump had just said, I hate what happened. I don't think it was right. I have all sorts of suspicions. But I lost in 20, and I'm going away. He would be leading by 10 points now.
Yeah.
But instead, he made himself more radioactive than he was in 20, and Biden is much weaker than he was in 20. So it's going to be, it's a match of 40-year-old heavyweights in the 15th round who are both a little punch drunk. That'll what we'll be looking at.
I like the boxing analogy, and we'll leave you with this on the sports side of things. I know that you're a Titans fan, but the Chiefs, I mean, there's a lot of talk here in Kansas City, obviously. You got Taylor Swift showing up at games. You got the Jets this weekend. What's the look from afar on what's happening here in Kansas City, Rich Lowry?
Oh, well, I have a soft spot, even though they beat the Titans twice in the playoffs. One was a championship game. I don't know whether the second was a championship game, but we just never had any chance against you guys. I mean, it's a wonderful team. Mahomes is just miraculous to look at. Even the Super Bowl he lost, I remember someone tweeted, Patrick Mahomes just threw the 10 most impressive incomplete passes in NFL history. Because he'd be falling down at the 45-yard line and hit someone in the helmet, in the end zone. It was just incredible. And Taylor Swift, I mean, she is a huge star. So you guys got it all going for you. The Jets, have a tough defense, but no quarterback. So. It was the most Jets thing ever to happen, right?
Yeah.
That you sign this guy, and the first series he goes down.
That is the most Jets thing ever. Well, Sunday Night Football should be interesting, and tonight we'll see what happens. Rich Lowry, editor of the National Review. Always good to have you on in Kansas City, Rich. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well done by him. Nice job as always.